Rihanna looked at me across the dinner table and said, "You know what made me the first black woman billionaire? I got tired of being ignored by the beauty industry." She held up her phone, showing Fenty Beauty's launch day numbers. $100 million in sales in 40 days. Not because I'm Rihanna the singer, because I solved a problem that a trillion-dollar industry refused to acknowledge for decades. I gave dark-skinned women foundation that actually matched their skin. Tonight, I'm sitting across from Robin Rihanna Fenty, the woman who transformed from a Barbadian pop star into the world's youngest self-made female billionaire. The numbers are staggering. Her Fenty Beauty empire is valued at $2.8 billion, making her worth $1.7 billion personally. But the story behind those numbers reveals how one woman's frustration with industry racism became the blueprint for the most disruptive beauty launch in history. "People think I just slapped my name on some lipstick and got rich," Rihanna continued, her Barbadian accent carrying the weight of years of struggle. "But this was 15 years in the making. Every red carpet, every photo shoot, every music video, I was fighting with makeup artists who didn't know how to work with my skin tone." The restaurant's ambient lighting caught the flawless finish of her foundation, a perfect match that seemed effortless but represented a revolution. Growing up in Barbados, I watched my mother struggle to find makeup that worked for her complexion. In stores, they'd have maybe 2 or 3 shades for dark skin. Always too orange, too red, never quite right. I promised myself that if I ever had the power to change that, I would. But didn't you try other ventures first? Music was my platform, not my endgame. By 2015, I was one of the best-selling artists of all time, but I was already thinking beyond albums. I launched a fashion line with Puma, tried fragrance partnerships, but nothing felt like my true calling until I started really analyzing the beauty space. Rihanna took a sip of wine, her eyes reflecting the strategic mind that built an empire. "I spent 2 years studying the beauty industry obsessively. L'Oreal, Estée Lauder, MAC. These brands were making billions, but their shade ranges were insulting. MAC had maybe 16 foundation shades total. L'Oreal had 12. For an industry serving women globally, it was unconscionable. The research was devastating. Studies showed that women of color represented over 40% of the beauty market, but were offered less than 20% of the shade options. Brands were literally leaving billions on the table because they couldn't be bothered to formulate for dark skin. What convinced you to enter such a competitive market? Competitive? It wasn't competitive, it was neglected. There was this massive gap between what the industry offered and what women actually needed. When I saw those numbers, I realized this wasn't about competing with existing brands. This was about creating an entirely new category. The waiter brought our first course, but Rihanna's focus remained laser-sharp on her story. I knew I needed serious backing, not just celebrity endorsement money. That's when I approached LVMH, Bernard Arnault's luxury empire. They'd never invested in an inclusive beauty brand, never partnered with a black woman entrepreneur, never even considered that diversity could be profitable. How did you convince them? Numbers don't lie. I presented market research showing that 85% of black women and 65% of Hispanic women couldn't find suitable foundation shades from major brands. I showed them social media data, millions of women posting about their struggles finding makeup matches using hashtags like #ShadeFail and #BeautyStruggles. But the real breakthrough was when I explained the psychology of inclusive beauty. When a woman finds a perfect foundation match, she doesn't just buy one product. She buys the entire ecosystem: concealer, powder, blush, everything. Brand loyalty in beauty is lifelong when you solve a fundamental problem. Rihanna's eyes lit up as she recalled the pitch. Bernard Arnault asked me directly, "Rihanna, why should LVMH bet on diversity?" I told him, because diversity isn't a bet, it's a demographic reality. In 20 years, people of color will be the majority in America. You can choose to serve them now or lose them to whoever does. Within 6 months, we had a deal. LVMH committed $10 million initially, with agreements for much more if we hit targets. But the real validation was their willingness to let me maintain creative control. This wasn't going to be another celebrity vanity project. This was going to be a legitimate beauty revolution. Tell me about developing the actual products. That's where the real work began. I spent 18 months in laboratories working with chemists to formulate 40 different foundation shades, not 40 variations of 5 base tones, 40 distinct undertones that would actually work for real women's skin. The chemistry was incredibly complex. Dark skin has different undertones: golden, red, olive, cool, warm, and traditional beauty brands just mixed brown into their existing formulas. That's why everything looked orange or ashy. We had to start from scratch. Rihanna pulled out her phone and showed me before and after photos from product testing. I flew women in from around the world: Nigeria, India, Philippines, Brazil, Jamaica, and had them test every single shade. If even one woman couldn't find her match, we reformulated. It took 40 attempts to get the darkest shades right. But the real innovation was understanding that inclusion isn't just about dark skin. We created shades for albino women, for redheads who couldn't find pale foundations without pink undertones, for Asian women who needed yellow-based formulas. True inclusivity means serving everyone, not just the extremes. How did you prepare for the launch? Everything hinged on the launch strategy. We couldn't afford to fail, not just financially, but culturally. If Fenty Beauty flopped, it would set back inclusive beauty for years. Other brands would say, "See, diversity doesn't sell." I leveraged my entire social media following: 60 million Instagram followers, 100 million across all platforms. But this wasn't just celebrity promotion. I was documenting a real problem and presenting a real solution. The main course arrived, but Rihanna's passion for the subject kept her talking animatedly. 3 months before launch, I started posting videos of women trying to find foundation matches at Sephora, Ulta, department stores. The footage was heartbreaking: women walking away empty-handed because nothing worked for their skin tone. Then I'd post the same women trying Fenty Beauty prototypes, finding perfect matches immediately. The contrast was shocking. These weren't paid actresses. These were real customers experiencing inclusion for the first time. The hashtag Fenty Beauty started trending months before we launched. Women were posting their own shade-matching struggles, tagging friends, sharing stories about feeling invisible to the beauty industry. We built a community around shared frustration. September 8th, 2017, launch day. I'll never forget it. We went live on Sephora.com at midnight Eastern Time. The website crashed within 10 minutes from traffic volume. Rihanna's voice carried the excitement of reliving that moment. By 6 a.m., we'd sold out of 15 shades completely. By noon, our entire inventory was gone. $5.2 million in sales in 12 hours. Sephora had never seen anything like it. This wasn't just product sales. This was pent-up demand finally being served. But the real validation came from the industry response. Within 24 hours, every major beauty brand was scrambling. L'Oreal announced they were expanding their shade range. MAC rushed to add darker foundations. Estée Lauder hired diversity consultants. We didn't just launch a brand. We forced an entire industry to confront its racism. And the crazy part? We proved that inclusion is incredibly profitable. How did the first few months go? Explosive growth beyond our wildest projections. Month 1, $72 million in sales. Month 2, $89 million. By the end of year 1, we generated $550 million in revenue. But more importantly, we'd fundamentally changed consumer expectations. Women started demanding better shade ranges from every brand. The Fenty effect became a real phenomenon. If your brand didn't offer at least 30 shades, you were considered behind the times. Rihanna showed me industry reports on her phone tracking the competitive response. L'Oreal went from 12 foundation shades to 50. MAC expanded to 60. Maybelline launched a 40-shade range. We created an arms race for inclusivity, and everyone benefited, especially consumers who'd been ignored for decades. The financial impact was staggering. In 2018, the overall foundation market grew by 23%, the largest single-year growth in beauty history. We hadn't just captured market share, we'd expanded the entire market by serving previously ignored customers. What about building the actual business infrastructure? That's where my partnership with LVMH became crucial. I knew how to create products and market to consumers, but building a billion-dollar supply chain? That required expertise I didn't have. LVMH brought manufacturing capabilities, global distribution networks, regulatory compliance for international markets. They could produce millions of units, ship worldwide, handle quality control. I provided the vision and cultural insight. They provided the execution infrastructure. But I maintained final approval on everything: product formulation, marketing campaigns, brand messaging. This couldn't be another case of a corporation co-opting a cultural movement. The authenticity had to remain intact. The restaurant was quieter now, allowing us to dive deeper into the business strategy. By year 2, we were ready for expansion. Savage X Fenty lingerie launched in 2018, applying the same inclusivity principles to undergarments. Traditional lingerie brands like Victoria's Secret were struggling with outdated beauty standards while we celebrated body diversity. The runway shows became cultural events. Instead of size 0 models, we featured women of every size, age, ethnicity. Pregnant models, models with disabilities, trans models, representation that the fashion industry had never seen at that scale. And again, the financial results proved that inclusion drives profits. Savage X Fenty hit $150 million in sales in year 1, while Victoria's Secret continued declining. We demonstrated that consumers were hungry for brands that reflected their reality. How did becoming a billionaire change your perspective? Rihanna's expression grew more contemplative. The billionaire milestone was validation, but also responsibility. When Forbes announced I was the first Black woman billionaire, it wasn't just personal success. It was proof that Black women could build global empires when given the resources and respect. But with that recognition came pressure to be perfect, to represent all Black women entrepreneurs. Every business decision gets scrutinized not just for profitability, but for cultural impact. The truth is, I became a billionaire by solving a problem that should never have existed. The beauty industry's exclusion of women of color wasn't just morally wrong. It was economically stupid. I just had the platform and persistence to prove it. What's your advice for other entrepreneurs, especially women of color? Don't wait for permission to solve problems you've experienced personally. The biggest business opportunities often exist in markets that established players ignore or underestimate. For women of color specifically, your perspective is your competitive advantage. You see gaps that others miss because you've lived the frustration of being underserved. Trust your instincts about what markets need, but also understand that building wealth requires more than good intentions. I could have launched an inclusive makeup line and remained a small brand. Becoming a billionaire required strategic partnerships, operational excellence, and relentless execution. As our dinner wound down, Rihanna reflected on the broader impact of her success. Fenty Beauty was never just about makeup. It was about proving that inclusion is profitable, that serving diverse customers creates sustainable competitive advantages, that representation matters in business, not just culture. We've inspired hundreds of inclusive beauty brands, changed industry standards permanently, and most importantly, made millions of women feel seen and valued as customers. The $1.7 billion valuation represents more than financial success. It's proof that businesses built on authentic inclusion can achieve unprecedented scale. But what I'm most proud of is the cultural shift. Young Black girls now see beauty entrepreneurship as a viable path. They see that their perspective has commercial value, that their experiences can become billion-dollar insights. What's next for the Fenty empire? We're expanding into skincare, hair care, wellness, every category where inclusion can create value. The goal isn't just to build a beauty conglomerate, but to demonstrate that diversity and profitability are inseparable. But beyond business growth, I want to use this platform to invest in other Black women entrepreneurs. I've been offered billions to sell Fenty Beauty, but maintaining ownership means maintaining the ability to create opportunities for others who look like me. As we stood to leave, Rihanna offered one final insight. The beauty industry taught me that the biggest business opportunities exist where established players have blind spots. If you're part of an underserved community, you're not just a potential customer, you're a potential entrepreneur with insider knowledge about unmet needs. I didn't become the first Black woman billionaire despite being a Black woman. I became a billionaire because I was a Black woman who understood what other Black women needed and had the courage to build it. This evening with Rihanna revealed that the most disruptive businesses aren't always built on new technology. Sometimes they're built on basic human dignity, serving customers that others ignore, and proving that inclusion isn't just morally right, it's incredibly profitable. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the other videos to hear the most private dinner conversations where billionaires reveal their deepest secrets. Which part inspired you the most? Drop it in the comments. Let's figure out how to become billionaires together.